This is the fiscal year 2024 5310 program call for projects workshop. Today is November 15th. It is 1:30 p.m. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the website so that others who were not able to join us today can come back. And also, so those of us who are joining us can go back and refer to the PowerPoint for any information that we may have missed. So with that, I just kind of want to go over our agenda today. I'm going to start with the call for projects introduction, kind of go over some of the details regarding the funding summary. Additionally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the LRVDC's program management plan before proceeding on to eligible applicants, specifically going over the McAllen urbanized area and subrecipient information before proceeding to eligible use of funds, covering what traditional or capital projects are and what non-traditional or operational projects are. And then we'll proceed to go over the breakdown of the application itself in case there are any questions about how to answer or what to submit. And there are two parts, part A and part B. And then we'll cover the application process, which includes the schedule of activities and the scoring criteria that's going to be used for evaluating projects. And then we'll have a Q&A, which will go over kind of those any missing questions that the presentation did not cover. All right, so the funding summary. In case you were unaware, the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council is the designated recipient responsible for managing the Federal Transit Administration's 5310 program within the McAllen urbanized area. So the 5310 program is intended to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities by providing funds for capital and operating expenses that expand transportation mobility options. The McAllen urbanized area, again, this formula funding is based on population. So we're using fiscal funding from fiscal year 22 and 2023, which amounts to about 1.6 million, or specifically $1,596,012. 5310 funds are eligible to support up to 80% of the cost of traditional or capital projects and up to 50% of non-traditional or operating costs. And so that means that for traditional or capital projects, a 20% match is required, or for non-traditional or operating projects, 50% match is required. And as part of the application process, your local match source must be identified. I'm going to go ahead and just take myself off camera. All right. Feel free to drop any information in the chat if you have them as we go, and I am monitoring it, and we can drop some information. So I think I kind of covered direct recipients like the LRGVDC have flexibility in how they select their subrecipient projects for funding, but the decision process must be clearly noted in a program management plan. And the LRGVDC's program management plan specifically describes the process for administering, managing, programming, selection, and overseeing the implementation of the projects. Per the LRGVDC 5310 PMP, the Rio Grande Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the RGVMPO, will act on behalf of the LRGVDC in the selection of projects on an impartial, objective, fair, and equitable basis through this competitive process. Additionally, the LRGVDC has set aside 10% of the program funds for program administration. Something that I don't cover into details in this workshop is that post-award of this competitive process, there will be additional requirements for any selected subrecipients. So this program administration covers the cost of that coordination for the LRGVDC, as we will be monitoring projects and funds for at least 3 to 4 years from the fiscal year they are designated for. And eligible applicants is another section of the workshop. Must be, to be eligible for funding, let me read that. To be eligible for funding, proposed projects must be located in or either have an origin or a destination within the McAllen urbanized area. So here is a map of the MUA. And so you can kind of see, as long as the proposed projects either have an origin or a destination within this area, then the project is eligible. In addition, all projects must be derived from the LGBTC's Regional Public Transportation Coordination Plan. Subrecipients or applicants that are potential subrecipients can include state or local government authorities, private or nonprofit organizations, and or operators of public transportation. So what's an operator of public transportation? Well, they are entities that provide regular, continuing, shared ride surface transportation services that are open to the general public or open to a segment of the general public defined by age, disability, or low income. Operators of public transportation are eligible as subrecipients for non-traditional Section 5310 projects. So that brings us to what are the eligible use of funds, or what are traditional or non-traditional projects? Are there any questions before I proceed? Let me just kind of take a break. I've been going for a little bit. Are there any questions on what the eligible use of funds are, or the McAllen urbanized area, or any information about the funding available?
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So how do you want us to identify the match in the application? Do you want us to include like a letter from our agency? Will that suffice, or?
Yeah, that kind of is going to be covered a little bit as part of your project application. There's two sections where we talk about the budget. And so this is where project sponsors are going to be asked to provide a complete budget indicating project revenues or expenditures. But then there's the part A3, and this is that proposed project budget where you're going to have after this section. I kind of had to take a screenshot because of the way it's broken down in the application. After this section, there's also a description period. So you'll name that source here. And that commitment, that demonstration of commitment, can be in that form of a letter.
Okay, great. And then my second question was, so if the project is selected for funding, when is the grant expected to be executed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're obviously coming up to the holiday season. We kind of gave the deadline of December 20th to be like before, but after Thanksgiving, we're going to evaluate early January as far as like the MPO or the LRGBDC. And we're anticipating to go to the TAC and policy for the February meetings, since the RGV MPO will pass a resolution to program these funds, and we will incorporate it into our MTP and our TIP. And so after that, you'll get an award notice letter, probably early March. And then we're going to probably use that time to coordinate or set up a coordination meeting with the COG themselves.
But these funds are not already in an executed grant, right? So they still have to go through the process of being placed on the TIP and all of that.
Yeah, and that's another reason why we're hoping to get them in February. There's typically a February revision cycle. I guess we would have had to do it early, but we looked at that when we decided these dates. So we're hoping to get them into the February revision cycle for the MTP and the TIP. We're hoping for that. And yes, that agreement has to happen after that happens. Yeah, great questions. And we'll come back and go into details for anyone else who has that. But again, we have a total of 1,596,000. So that's something to keep in mind when you're submitting your applications. But let's get back to potential traditional or non-traditional projects. So traditional Section 5310 projects are capital projects as defined in 49 United States Code 53023. At least 55% of program funds must be used on capital projects to meet the special needs of seniors and individuals with disabilities when public transportation is insufficient, inappropriate, or unavailable. More than 50% of the apportionment can be used for these types of projects. So the intention of 5310 program funds, right, are to meet the special needs of seniors and individuals with disabilities where public transportation is insufficient, inappropriate, or unavailable. So a minimum, the floor not the ceiling, is 55% of funds. And these examples or project use of funds is the purchase or procurement of buses and vans, the potential addition of wheelchair lifts, ramps, or securement devices, any improvements as well. Transit-related information technology systems, including scheduling, routing, one-call systems, then the mobility management programs, or acquisition of transportation services under a contract, lease, or other arrangement. Non-traditional projects is another section of them. These can be capital projects and or operating projects that go beyond the scope of the American with Disabilities Act. And they complement paratransit services or public transportation alternatives designed to assist older adults and people with disabilities. A maximum of 45% of program funds, that is a max, that is the ceiling, not the floor. A maximum of 45% of program funds may be used for projects described above or below, actually, that exceed the requirements of the ADA, improve access to fixed route service, and decrease reliance by individuals with disabilities on complementary transit or alternatives to public transportation to assist seniors and individuals with disabilities. Examples include travel training, volunteer driver programs, mobility management programs, construction of an accessible path to a bus stop, including curb cuts, sidewalks, accessible pedestrian signals, or other accessible features, improvements to signage or wayfinding technology, incremental cost of providing same-day service or door-to-door service, and the purchase of vehicles to support new accessible taxi, ride-sharing, and/or van pooling programs. Any questions on the use of funds?
Yes, I
Yes.
got a question.
Oh, go for it, Maribel.
On traditional, is it allowed for us to purchase benches?
I honestly, I feel like benches kind of fall more into construction, but I guess not. Let me double check with that. Can I come back to that question, Clarissa? Do you mind helping me out with that research on the side? I know we have some sample of projects, so we'll look into that real quick. I wasn't prepared to answer benches, but I would assume non-traditional, but we'll get back to you.
Okay.
Rodney, was your question separate?
Yeah, so if an agency doesn't currently have a paratransit program and they're not required to have one, if they were to offer something that resembled a paratransit demand response service, that is, it's specifically for people with disabilities, but it wasn't paratransit, would that be considered a non-traditional operating project?
I would consider that non-traditional. That's just me personally. This is my first time doing a call for projects or being an evaluator of projects for this program. But there is a bonus section in the scoring criteria for innovative projects. And in my opinion, if it's something that you're not typically providing, and it's something that is like on demand or different for your agency, then we might be able to kind of identify it as an innovative service concept that improve access or mobility for those target populations, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, we'll cover the details and the breakdown of the application. So the application has two parts, Part A and Part B, but Part A itself has three parts. And so that's why I really wanted to break it down. Part A1 is the information about your funding requests, and this includes applicant data, your basic legal name, contact person, an address. We do want an address that we can mail things to because we want to send an award notice letter digitally, but also via snail mail. But a telephone number so that we can reach you and call you to coordinate those meetings or to kind of just check in throughout the year. But then your fax, which we likely won't use, so it's okay if you put in but an email for any contact person that you're listing, and then an applicable website. So if you do have a website that kind of highlights your agency's transit services or who you are as an agency, that's kind of what we're looking for as far as website. And you can provide more than one link if you'd like. The project description itself should include the project title and a brief description. And when we say brief description, we're looking for 1 or 2 sentences that we'll incorporate into our transportation improvement program or the documents that we have that just kind of basically highlight, this is going to construct I don't know, 2 ADA ramps and an 8-foot wide sidewalk near transit stops A and B. And then that project type is just going to be a check mark, either it's non-traditional or traditional. And then if applicable, how, like, let's say, for example, you're providing a new paratransit service, then what hours are you proposing? What days are you proposing to provide those on-demand services? What is the estimated cost per one-way trip? And then how many estimated daily riders for your weekday or your weekend are estimated? So how are you going to project that? We can work with you there and look into it deeper if you need help kind of estimating those riderships. Part A2 is the project narrative. And so this project narrative, it goes over, we want you to provide, there's no space. Let me kind of open this up real quick. Let me see. Let's see. I want to show you the application itself. So when you come here, you're going to see that this section, this part, you have fill in the blank areas, but then at this part, you don't have fill in the blank, but you still have these questions. So please provide a Word document and label it Part 2 Project Narrative. And that's where you're kind of going to go over these pieces. We don't have any character limits. We don't have any restrictions as to how much information you can provide. But we do recommend that it's just easy to follow and not too convoluted so that we're losing the intention of your narrative. But let me go into that. For planning and coordination, again, describe the project and how it will be coordinated with the public or with private transportation or social service agencies serving these low-income populations or individuals with disabilities. And please describe efforts to market the project and ways to promote public awareness of the program. And any letters of support should be obtained from key stakeholders and attached to the grant application. So what does this mean if you're working with a specific social service agency or group? That kind of coordination should be documented with a letter from your potential partners. And then again, if they're going to help you market or promote it, that's the kind of thing we're going to be looking for. All of this is related to the scoring criteria, and we'll kind of go over deeper, and that should help you also in the narrative you're going to provide. So the demonstration of the need, how is your project going to provide unmet transportation needs? How does it seek to address the planning efforts and the documents that need? So does it really, ultimately, does it cover an area targeted by the Regional Public Transportation Coordination? And describe how the project will alleviate the transportation need. Oh, you know what? I just realized I'm not in full screen mode. Wow, sorry. I get to so again, there's no character limit, but if you could simply or clearly describe, how it's covering targeted areas from our coordination plan and how the project will alleviate the transportation need. Again, this kind of is a redundancy from that part A1 with the estimation of the number of people served. So I think this can kind of cover your methodology used or how you came to determine any potential looking that. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Maribel, for looking that up. Oh, Clarissa, I'm sorry. Thanks, Clarissa, for looking that up for Maribel. So the project application should demonstrate that the proposed project is the most appropriate match of service delivery to the need. And so what performance measures, are you going to use to track the effectiveness of the service in meeting the identified goals? So really quickly, let me jump out again. I kind of want to get up here. I know we have let me see if I have it under transit info. I should have pulled this up first, but here's our coordination plan, and I'm actually, oops, that didn't work. I guess I gotta update my links. I'm gonna be surprised if that doesn't open. Okay, I'll come back to it. I wanted to show you the coordination plan, but if you look on our website, we do have the program management plan here, and I'll go ahead and look for that regional coordination plan. I'm surprised that I don't have it automatically linked, but we'll go ahead and look for that document and put it here under additional resources on our webpage. But again, we do want to make sure that this is going to help the region and any identified needs that came out of that plan. And your benefits. So this could be short and sweet. It's the only one question they have, but what are your project's ultimate goals and objectives, right? If, for example, you're providing benches, you know, is that goal is to help the experience or the need of, you know, the aging population, or for anyone who's to sit down, like, what are the goals? What are the objectives of your project proposal? Thank you so much, you guys. Y'all are the best. What could I do without you guys? There we go. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. We're going to post this online. This is what I wanted to say. Use this to find the language where you can find the coordination. So we have here some recommendations for coordination or planning for coordinated services. There's also some recommendations. There's some goals and objectives. If your project is going to help improve reliability, connectivity, you know, use this language, cite your pages. That'll help us ensure, you know, that you did look through it, that you did propose a project that is in alignment with what came out of that effort. And so that would be really helpful for us evaluators in ensuring that alignment. And this should also help with your narrative in the demonstration of that need, right? So you're likely to find some language in that plan that can help you explain how the project relates to other services or how it can be achieved within your technical capacity. We do want you to describe a plan for monitoring and evaluating the service and steps to be taken if original goals are not achieved. So this is particular if you are proposing something new, something you haven't done. You know, if it's something you've already done, let us know. How do you monitor that? How do you evaluate that? How do you go about improving it? But if you don't, and it's new, then what do you think about that monitoring, that evaluation? And these things don't need to be perfect, but they're going to help the LRGVDC and the MPO with monitoring in the future. So that's going to help us with project development and just kind of communicating to FTA and to our funders, you know, how we're using these funds. The budget itself, again, you can use, this is a narrative section of it. So the next section is going to kind of be more fill in the blank. There's a tiny brief description piece, but if you need to expand and if that space in part 3 doesn't have the space you need to get into the description, then I would recommend you put some of that narrative here. You know, describe the complete budget, any potential revenues or what you're going to be expending. And so, yeah, and it says here, you can provide that in the format provided in part 3. But again, this is an extra space if you want to add additional narrative. And if you could describe how that ensures cost effectiveness, I feel like that will also help the evaluators be like, oh, wow, they really thought this through. They understand their expenses and their potential revenue, and they have goals. And so that's, you know, something that we're going to be looking for. And this is the innovation part. This is the kind of bonus part. If you're proposing something new, that is part of the scoring criteria. All of this section, part 2, the narrative, is part of your scoring criteria. So this is where you want to communicate to the evaluators, you know, how is this an innovative approach? Maybe it's just innovative to you. Maybe it's innovative to the region. Maybe it's innovative to the area, the state. You know, communicate that to us. How is it innovative about that approach? And then, you know, is it something that we could potentially replicate in the future? So again, the narrative should provide an easy to follow description of the project or support, and then use the scoring criteria as a guide. And that's what I'm going to go over next. And this is the last part of part A, which is the proposed project budget. This is what it says on the top of that page. then you're just going to fill out these with numbers. This is where you're going to identify that local funding source. If you have grant agreements or other, you know, leveraged funds, go ahead and provide us an example of that, those additional funds. And if there's going to be a commitment of funds beyond the grant period, let's say like for benches, the continued maintenance, I would communicate that. I mean, benches don't just get sat on and put up, they have to be maintained. They have to be cleaned, or the area around it. So that's just one example. There's, again, a small brief description after you see these numbers, but it's pretty small. And then the part B is what you're going to be attaching. I do like exhibits labels. So you're going to put a document or a packet together with your attachments. And so, you know, page 1 could be exhibit A, map of proposed service and service area. Exhibit B, you know, is your documentation of eligibility. Exhibit C, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can choose how you want to provide these required attachments. But if you could provide a table of contents for the packet you're providing, that would be super helpful. And I think you can know, or you can ask us directly if you have additional documents that are applicable or that help us communicate it. You know, again, it's we want more information if that more information really helps drive home the intention of your project and why you should be rewarded, but not just a bunch of information that we're going to be like, how is this applicable to this project, you know? Any questions on the application itself before I move on? I think it's pretty straightforward. And you might just have questions as you're trying to fill it out, and that's okay. Again, Rudy, myself, Clarissa, the MPO staff, we're here to help. We may not know everything, but together we can try to provide you with the information that you need and get back to you in a timely manner. So the application process. We kind of did announce at the RTAP, the Regional Transportation Advisory Panel meeting, we announced that call for projects. We officially opened it on November 1st when we had a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. And then today is November 15th, where we're having this workshop for all interested applicants. The deadline itself is 5 p.m. on December 20th. We wanted to give you all at least, 5 business weeks or 6 business weeks, I think, ultimately, to develop an application. We're going to kind of use the time. Different, MPO staff or different evaluators are going to be in and out over the holidays. So, but everyone will have the applications after December 20th. They'll be able to review them in their own time. We're going to meet early, I think, right after the BPAC meeting, the day after the BPAC meeting in January. So that first week of January is what I'm looking at, to kind of have an early evaluation. So this is going to be dependent on how many applications we do receive. But if we have received a few, then we could probably knock it out the first week or 2 of January. But if we have more, we just want to make sure that we have all of our project scores and consensus with the LRGVDC in early January, because we will be presenting to TAC for action as soon as possible. And if for some reason these February dates don't work out to get the projects programmed into our MTPN tip, then we'll notify the group of applicants to let them know if those dates change for whatever reasons. But we are mindful of the agreements and the time it takes to get funding. So we'll do what we can to ensure that we get it in the February revision cycle. And so I think sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess this is a question in regards to the application for financing. I imagine it's going to be fairly competitive. And I wanted to see, I guess, is there a process for, I guess, creating like a, I don't know how you call it, but it's like where you get a fraction of what you requested. So let's say we applied for like 4 units, but you're like, oh no, we'll probably give you guys maybe 2 units or 1 unit. You know what I mean? Like we're like, oh, okay, we can apply, but we apply with the idea
partial funding.
There we go, partial funding, yes.
Well, I don't think we have like an established way to do that, but I think we are open to partial funding. I think it would depend on the application and what the request is for. I can definitely see where like partial funding for something proposed may not be helpful at all.
Yeah.
But then I can see where there's some projects that, you know, the partial funding is like, hey, we'll still take a piece of the pizza, you know? And I think that we can definitely work with, you know, we can kind of evaluate and score projects and then kind of go back to our applicants and see where that is applicable.
Yeah, because
Does
we
that make sense?
definitely have like stronger parts, like where I could say that is exactly in the coordination plan.
I got
And
you.
then there are parts where I'm like, that's kind of in the coordination plan. And I think it works really well. But I mean, we'd rather get some rather than nothing, right?
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great example. I'm just going to go ahead and recommend here in the workshop that if you do have a priorities list for yourself or your organization, then feel free to put that in your budget narrative. Feel free to put that in this section over here where you have some space. Like you probably won't have enough space in the description here, but here, you know, this is what we're requesting. And in area, like in priorities, we really need these buses or we really need these benches or whatever. I think that would be helpful for us to kind of look at your project in a better way and determine, you know, where funding is most needed. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. I appreciate you. Thanks for your question. Rodney?
Yes, sorry, to that point, every agency that's applying should only submit one application, right? So we wouldn't submit if we had a couple of different projects that maybe were not completely tied together, but they were still from our organization. We wouldn't submit two applications, right?
I mean, if they're very different, maybe I'm gonna ring a friend. Rudy, what do you think? I'm gonna ring a friend. Rudy has more experience than I do with some transit call for projects. So
Thanks, Eva. And Rodney, to your question, I've never experienced where there's a limited amount of applications that can be received by any particular entity. I think if you have multiple projects, submit them. The better chance that you have to receive something, the better. And if they differ from each other, even more so, I think is a opportunity to fund something rather than nothing at all. So I would say if you have two completely different, 3, 4, submit them. And that's the job of the evaluation committee. And of course, like every other call for projects, we then take those evaluations to our technical advisory committee and our board, and they're the ultimate decision makers, of course. But on the staff side, I think the more the merrier, because we know there's a high demand for this type of funding. We know that we have multiple providers in our region. And so the more submissions, the better, I think. But once again, I've never received any type of guidance that says there's limitations on the type of applications or the amount that can be submitted.
Okay, that sounds good.
thank you. Thanks, Rudy. I know, yeah, I was thinking about it. And in the TASA, the category 9, we do have, you know, one agency or one organization submitting multiple applications for separate projects. But, you know, I think if you are going to submit one application, that's perfectly fine, or submit 2, that's perfectly fine. But I recommend you using your narrative in that budget area to kind of just describe if you are submitting one application, your priorities. So if you do have 3 separate projects in one application or, you know, that aren't as tied together, then let us know which sections are your priority. And it's not to say it'll all be dismissed or a section will be dismissed or whatever. It's just to kind of better understand your needs or your agency's needs. Does that answer your question, Ronnie?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, great. And is it Nazanin? Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you. I guess kind of building off these questions about funding and budget, I'm curious because I saw the amount that we have allocated and it said in the instructions that this is, you can sort of propose within this amount, and then it sounded like it was kind of flexible, but I guess I'd like to get an idea of, in the past, what is sort of the ballpark that successful applications have proposed in terms of funding, and then how many have been funded in the past?
Those are some great questions. I'm like, I have some documents here that Clarissa shared with me, and I had like a breakdown of some average costs. But I don't think I know how many have been funded. Typically, I think in the past, there hasn't been a huge demand for the program funds, but I'm trying to like look into this as we go. I should have prepared that. Those are great questions.
Eva,
I guess I kind of go ahead.
oh, sorry, I don't have the exact documents, but if I remember correctly, and you can correct me once you pull something up, but in the past, since we have like the non-traditional and traditional split, the traditional was either split between Metro McAllen or Valley Metro or just Valley Metro, and then the non-traditional has usually been split between one or two municipalities at max, and that is typical. There might be differences between previous calls, but and in regards to awarding amounts, like just off the top of my head, I think, and then you have to do the 80-20 split, but I think the award funding, like Wesco was awarded like 500,000, but they came up with 100,000, so they had 20% of that award amount, and so that was a project award like that was awarded in the previous call. It was around that range. So once the document's found, and they can be like, actually, it was a different amount, but I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. And to my knowledge, yes, I do believe, I would have to agree with Rodney. I believe they just want milestone reports. And so they want to see that you're working, and when you start like, and I believe there's also like other things with like, if you have to clear something with the Texas Historical Society to start doing a project on a certain area, you know, those types of things. And so milestones. But if you guys do see like there is a deadline to complete the project with the funding like TASA, then I could be wrong.
Yeah, let me go into what we have on our website. So I don't know why I went to the bylaws. I was just trying to get to the webpage. My webpage is coming out like it's on mobile, so just give me a second. Why you do that to me? Okay, we're just gonna go old school. I'm gonna type it in. What is it?
I think you have it zoomed in.
I don't think it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm shocked. Yeah. I'll come back. Hold up. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. So when you're on the RGV MPO website, you kind of go to our transportation improvement program. And when you come into here, you'll see the transit projects. And so I just want to kind of see, is it under here? Is that what this document is? Sorry. All right, sorry. So that's what I just pulled up here. And so you can kind of see like how much or how the funding has been split over the past couple years. But this is just the federal, state, or other, and the total funds. It doesn't go down by project breakdown until you get into here. And so you can kind of see here, that's the summary. This is the 5310 project, and then how much of it was from federal funds. And so again, this is that brief project description that we have. And that's part of the application process as well. And so this is a different funding category, but this is kind of where you would find that example. And so I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat as well. All right. But I appreciate those questions. I think that's very valid. And I'm going to take some meeting notes about, how to better improve this presentation for next time. But I think that was great examples. Are there any other questions I can answer before proceeding with the PowerPoint? Yeah, it's kind of hard to figure out. And to be honest, I'm still learning. So we'll just learn together. Thank you, Clarissa. We got a great team here at the MPO and at the LGVDC. Thanks, Javi, also for covering what you were aware of. We'll have to, these are basically going to be your evaluators. So just FYI. But yeah, we can answer these questions or come back. All the information exists. It's just about getting it in the right place and presenting it together. Again, we'll do better next time. But we have this call for projects. Again, we'll work on that. And again, when you think about the scoring criteria, when you think about your description, your application, what you're submitting as far as your required documents, keep in mind which sections are way heavier in the scoring eligibility. So as far as like project planning and coordination, that's about 25 points total. Your service and your sustainability is going to be also 25 points. Your benefits are going to be 25 points. And then you see a reduction with the demonstration of need. And then the budget is 10 points. And then the bonus is that added information or innovation. And just really quickly to answer your question, Rodney, Brownsville urbanized area does not also have its own call for projects, since the Brownsville MPO basically worked for Brownsville, Rancho Viejo, and Los Fresnos. All of the FTA funding for 5310 stays with Brownsville Metro, if that makes sense. So they are the designated recipient, and those funds do not go to the LRGVDC the way the McAllen urbanized area funds do. So just FYI. I'm not sure how they use those funds either, or how they select their projects, but I'm sure there's a program management plan related to those funds for that urbanized area. But this is that section. This is all under scoring criteria. It's written as a paragraph, but in the presentation, I just bullet pointed it to kind of break it down easier. But when you're describing in your project narrative, remember, we're going to be evaluating based on their ability to coordinate with other public transportation options. So cover that in your narrative. Your project sponsor should clearly identify any stakeholders and explain how they will keep their stakeholders involved. They should describe how they will promote public awareness of the project, and then submit those letters of support from key stakeholders. So that will be 25 points worth of your application. Your service and sustainability is also another 25 points. You can provide a well-defined area operations plan if one exists, or capital procurement plan. Your proposed project timeline, as well as with implementation steps, in case selection of, I'm just going to use the bench because it's an example, but I'm just like selection of the type of bench, or the procurement process, and the installation, procedures. So those different steps are all key to your plan or your project. And what personnel is going to be assigned to that, right? And how are they qualified? This is, again, 25 points. You should be able to demonstrate institutional capability, or you should be able to, provide documents that show your FTA certification or assurances. And the benefits, again, making sure that you're consistent with the objectives of the 5310 program, identifying the number of persons expected to be served. It's basically the same thing as the application, but this is kind of like your checklist, if you want to look at it that way. If your project narrative can kind of use the scoring criteria as a checklist, then you're likely to be communicating all the information that helps your evaluators score your project. And so then again, your well-defined project budget clearly identifies anticipated project expenditures or revenues. Any commitment from that matching funds must be included. And then any long-term efforts for funding sources beyond the grant period. And so this is where that RPTCP that was dropped in the link, thanks guys, that was dropped in the chat, is there. Again, use that for this section. It is 15 points, but clearly identify your measurable outcome-based performance measure, and we'll help track the effectiveness of that service and the goal that you identify. Demonstrate that the proposed project is the most appropriate match of service delivery to the need, and that it's cost effective. So you may receive up to 5 bonus points for innovative service concepts or facilities that have the potential for improving access or mobility for the target populations. And any additional information or documentation should be provided to support those bonus points. And this is the part of the presentation or the workshop where we have Q&A. I have enjoyed the dialogue back and forth so far. I appreciate all the help I'm getting in answering these questions. But I wanted to be really clear, similar to the transportation alternative set aside project, actually similar to all federal transportation dollars. The funds are available for obligation during the fiscal year of apportionment plus 2 additional years. So funds apportioned in fiscal year 22 are available until the end of 24, etc. As an example. Any funds remaining unobligated at the end of the period are added to the next year's program apportionment and reapportioned among all areas. This is the website. I wanted to really point out this has been recorded. It's going to be put here in the program workshop. We're going to upload it right here with the PowerPoint itself and then a separate link for the recording. And we're going to add that regional coordination plan into the additional resources. But this is the website where all that information is. And then please remember that we're asking you to email your application and documents to info@rgbnpo.org no later than 5 p.m. on Wednesday, December 20th. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and drop my direct email in the chat, egarcia@rgbnpo.org. I know we do have several staff out next week for Thanksgiving, and I hope you're enjoying your holidays as well. But I will be in the office Monday through Wednesday. My information is also on the website in case you want to have a direct call. Sometimes that's just easier. I know I don't have a lot on my calendar right now, but if you go to the About Us and contact us, you'll kind of see my information here below. And so just feel free to call me. That's my office number. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks again. I'll be on for a little while.
Have a good one.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Eva.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Eva.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.